Today's session would be in continuation of what we have been discussing for the past few weeks, which is capitalizing, when to capitalize a particular sentence, a particular letter in a word, in a sentence. What is the specific usage, and what are the rules in it? So today we will be covering a new thing in the same capitalization topic. So it is names of countries, nationalities, and specific languages. So if you see here, whenever we name a country, whenever we type country name or any nationality or any specific languages, we have to capitalize the name, because as we know, by general usage itself, it is a proper noun. So anything which is specific, anything which comes under proper nouns category, they have to be capitalized. In case if they are used in a general generic usage, or maybe in common in general, it becomes a common noun, because that is not specific, so they cannot be capitalized. But in this case, they are proper names, so they have to be capitalized. For example, here in this case, Costa Rica or India or America, Bangladesh, Pakistan, China, Russia, Ukraine. So all these countries, because they are proper names, they have to be capitalized. And when you see nationalities also, so suppose if a person hails from India, we'll say Indian. If he hails from China, we'll say Chinese, or some different parts of the country, then we'll say, if he's from America, we'll say American or European or something like that. So any nationalities, when the person belongs to particular geography, or if they are identified with an ethnic group, then that is also considered as a proper noun. They have to be capitalized. So for example, here if you see in this case, Indian, it becomes a nationality here, so it has been capitalized. And if you see specific languages like Hindi, which is spoken in India, or maybe French or English or Spanish or Marathi or Bengali, any language, usually languages, nationalities, and countries are considered as proper names. So that is the reason why we have to capitalize them. So that is the rule in capitalization for these things. And if we see here, I've come up with some examples here, just to make it clear when to capitalize things and when to not. So the first example here, it is English is made up of many languages, including Latin, German, and French. So this is a statement, or this is a sentence. So can you identify if it is properly written or properly made, or are there any mistakes in it, or can we make it better?
So yeah, I think already PowerPoint is identified.
Yeah. Okay. So it is, as we know, just as we discussed. Sorry. Yeah. So as just we discussed, so as we discussed, because they are languages, that is the reason why we have capitalized them. So Latin, German, French, and English, it is same. So this would be the proper sentence. So because they are proper nouns, they have to be capitalized. If you see here, in the second example, my mother is British and my father is Dutch. So this is another example. Can you say, is it fine, or there needs to be any change?
D capital.
D capital, is it?
Yeah.
Okay. So my mother is British and my father is Dutch. So this basically says mother hails from Britain and father hails from Netherlands. So it says about nationality. So D has to be capitalized here in this particular sentence. So it has to be capital D. And if you see in the third example, it says the Mennonites began to worship in the Netherlands in the 16th century. So is it fine, or do we have to make any changes to the nationality or language or this anything?
16th century should capitalize.
Sorry, Savan.
16th century necessary should be capitalized.
Okay. So actually the sentence is correct.
Okay.
Netherlands is the name of the country. It is a proper name. It is capitalized, and rest of the things are generic usage. And 16th century, when it comes to 16th century, what happens in English is anything which comes under proper noun, proper name. That name can be name of person, name of a place, name of thing, or name of something. It is specific to that, it is capitalized. But in case of 16th century, it is not a specific usage. It is in general usage. We'll say 16th century, we'll say 18th century. So only usually we capitalize eras, like for example British Raj. It is considered as a proper name because we are talking about a particular age or particular era. There is some significant things or significant changes have been made. So British Raj or Victorian era, or maybe some era can be named. But in 16th century becomes a generic usage. So in English it is centuries are not proper nouns, so we won't capitalize. Actually, there is a next slide which specifically talks about centuries. In the coming slide we'll come to that. In the fourth example, if you see, Jason has traveled extensively in Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia. So this is another example. Can anyone say what changes have to be made to this sentence?
I think South and East Asia, no? East should be capitalized.
Okay. So here in this case, Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia are their proper names. So the first letter have been capitalized, and Southeast Asia is also right. Usually Southeast Asia, Southeast is a compound word. So it is not a normal, so Southeast together makes a word. So basically we are not separating South and East. So we are saying Southeast Asia, the Asian part which is in between the South and East. So it makes a single word. So Southeast is correct. E would be small only here in this case. So these are the things. So we'll move to the next slide. So usually we often quote other people's words or other people's motivational speeches, or other people, what if someone asks about what they have said, we usually quote what others have said. We put direct quotations there. So one thing which we have to remember is, whenever we are starting the quote, the first letter has to be in capital letter. So here in this case, if you see, Emerson once said, "A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds." So A has to be in capital letter. If not A, if there is something, anything, any other word, the first letter, whenever the quotation starts, the first letter would be in capital letter. And in case the quotation is made into two sentences, usually sometimes there are certain situations where we break the single quotation to two quotations by adding some our own words. In that case, the first quotation would start in capital letter and the second one would start in small letter, because they are actually one quotation. This thing. If you see the next one, usually, as we know, whenever a famous poem, like a famous poem or article or a book or song or movie or any proverb or something, usually we capitalize them, or maybe some organization name. But what we have to remember is we cannot capitalize the articles, or we cannot capitalize prepositions in between. If you see here, one of Jerry's favorite books is The Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye. The Catcher in the Rye is the name of the book. Here T has been capitalized, he has been capitalized R, but not I in the, because they're preposition and an article. So whenever we see preposition article in any title, even though it is a title, they cannot be capitalized. But the name has to be in capital letter. The first thing, the T or catcher, right? Because they talk about gender, proper nouns, so they are the proper names. But these are not the proper names; they are preposition and articles. So these are the things. So we'll move to the next topic in the same capitalization. So these are also the names, So, but the difference between the previous one and this thing is, they are actually even within the same country. Usually, we have different ethnic groups, different communities, which usually the identities are formed depending upon their community, depending upon their religion, depending upon their social, racial, political, and other different aspects. So even they form as a name. If you see here, African Americans, this would become a separate, different type of ethnic group, which are basically identified by their region. So that is the reason why A in African and A in American have been capitalized. If you see Democrats, people who support Democratic Party, usually they all identify themselves as Democrats because they're inclined towards Democratic Party, or maybe some people belonging to Republic Party, they'll say Republicans. So any identity which is formed and which becomes a proper noun. So how we can identify them is how exactly they are used, in which context they are used. Are they basically talking about the name? Are they basically identifying this whole group into a single in single term? Then it becomes a name. It becomes a proper noun. So they would be capitalized. Here, if you see Green Bay Packers, Green Bay Packers is some football team. I think it's a football team in America. And here, Friends of Wilderness is another organization, and Chinese basically. It's obvious that they are identifying depending upon the region based. So likewise, we often see in India when it comes to, we'll say these particular people belong to this voters. Usually voters are divided into or then behavioral side, like which party are they more supported to, which party are they voting to. They're identified as left wing, right wing, or maybe with some names that changes from state to state. So any identity which is formed with, which gives a name, which gives an identity to a specific group, that becomes a proper noun. So the first letter has to be capitalized in that. So these are the things. And does anyone have any doubts in this thing? So we'll move to the periods and events. So just now, as Savan quoted about 16th century and this thing. So we'll specifically talk about periods, events, and eras, usually what. So in English, what happens is usually we see different set of periods, and the identification of period or an event are different for different people. But in general, basically by rule in English, usually any period which has a significance to it, like any major change has happened, like for example 1942 Quit India movement has happened, it is identified as a different event which has some historic importance. Or Dandi March in 1930 or something like that, non-cooperation movement. So any major event, any significant event which we are talking, so basically we are talking about the change which it has, that event has brought. So it is identified as a proper noun. So we are giving a name to that particular event, that particular period which has a significance. So it is not a common usage, it is a specific usage. We are talking about specific thing, like Quit India movement or this thing, or we are talking about some British Raj, or maybe about some King Akbar period, or maybe Shivaji period. So usually we identify this era or this thing as depending upon the king, or depending upon the queen, or depending upon the people who have ruled, like Jhansi Lakshmi Bai's rule, something like that. So the events are identified with the name. Here in our case, it is Victorian era, or Great Depression, which happened in 1929 or 30, like that, or recession, which happened in 2008, financial crisis. So events or periods which have specific significance, they are identified as a name, and first letter would be capitalized, as you see here in this case. British Raj, Stone Age, in this thing. But if you see 16th century, 16th century basically in English is usually centuries are not considered as a specific events. They are not considered as a specific period. It's just like a time starting from morning to evening. Likewise, a 16th century which starts from 1501 to 1600, or maybe 20th century which starts from 1901 to 2000. So basically, it's a period. It spans across so many years. So if you are talking about specific event which happened in that particular time, then we'll identify that thing as a proper noun. But usually in centuries are not identified as names or proper nouns. They are identified as common nouns in English. So as we know, common nouns cannot have a capital letter in the beginning. But are there any chances of having 16th century or 20th century? Are there any chances of having capital letter in this? There are, but that depends upon the context, how we are referring to it. Are we talking about 16th century specific things which happened, like for example industrial revolution happened in 20th century, or are we talking anything which is specific or which brings some context about making that century as a proper noun? Then this is the first letter will be capitalized. But here in general in English, centuries are common nouns that cannot be capitalized. And when it comes to Stone Age, this also sometimes Stone Age is referred as common noun, or sometimes it is referred as specific noun. So when we are capitalizing it, we have to identify whether are we talking specific things in the, which happen in Stone Age, or is it used in general generic space. And there are certain examples with these events and periods in the coming slide. I'll show them to you. So we'll do some practice here. We'll have come up with some examples. So we'll try to identify whatever the changes have to be made, or this sentence is correct. So we'll see. We'll start with the first one. First one is, most of the World War I veterans are now deceased. So this is the sentence. Can anyone identify what changes have to be made to this sentence?
I don't think any change is required.
Right, that is correct, sir. So no changes have to be required. We are specifically talking about World War I. So that is the reason it becomes proper noun. So WW have been capitalized. So this is the thing. And if you see in the second sentence, in the Middle Age, poor hygiene was partly responsible for the spreading of bubonic plague. So can anyone identify any mistakes or?
Plague has to be B and B caps.
Sorry, Jerem.
No, the bubonic plague, I think B and B has to be capital.
Okay.
I think B should be capital.
Okay.
So if M is capital, A is also, A should be also capital.
Sorry, sir.
Middle age, so A should be also capital A.
Okay. Any other changes? So if we start from the beginning, middle age, poor hygiene. Usually, often we encounter hygiene condition, poor hygiene conditions are observed after the middle age, or health conditions start off the kind of get into deterioration state, because human body is also a machine, and over a period when it gets old, we'll see some poor hygiene things which happen. So we are talking something specific which happens in the middle age. So here in this case, middle age, M has to be in capital and A also have to be in capital. So middle age becomes a proper noun here in this case because the context is such. And if you see, bubonic plague is the name. It is a proper name. It is a name of that particular disease which has been. It's the name of the disease, so it becomes a proper name. So as you guys mentioned, B and P have to be in capital letters. So this is with the second example. If I move to the third one, Roman Britain is the setting for the Minimus comic books. Anyone say which part needs changes here? So here in this case, this sentence is perfectly all right. Roman Britain is usually, but basically the islands which Britain used to rule, where Romans used to be there. So it has identified those particular places under Roman Britain era under that rule. So they have been identified as one specific group, and their ethnicity becomes Roman Britain. So that is the reason. So it becomes proper noun here in this case. So this is fine. And if I go to the fourth example, the McCarthy era inspired Arthur Miller to write The Crucible. So can anyone find it?
M and E should be there.
M.
Okay. Any other changes? Right. So McCarthy is actually the name of name of a person who is a senator in US. So basically the person's name is capital M, and the C is also a capital, McCarthy. So usually he brought some revolutionary or some controversial changes during his time period, and that particular time period is identified with that particular head or the ruler or leader who is there. So basically it becomes the name of that person. So McCarthy is that particular person's name. So that is the reason why we have to capitalize McCarthy M and the C, and era also this thing. Arthur Miller is the person name, and this is the book name. So all the proper nouns have been named they have been identified as our proper names, and they are capitalized. And if I move to fifth example, which is middle school students often enjoy studying the social changes that took place in the Roaring 20s. So is it fine, or do we need any changes to the sentence?
It's fine.
Okay.
I think the R and T have to be capitalized because I think it seems like the name of that particular.
Yeah, I think the Roaring 20s, the name of that period, 1920s.
Right, that is correct. Actually, that is the particular time period, and that has been identified with Roaring 20s name. So this becomes the proper noun. So R is capitalized and T is capitalized. So they are not. The context is not about generic or general usage. It is specific to that particular time period. So here in this case, R would be in capital, T also would be in capital. So if I move to the next example, in the 15th and 16th centuries, England blossomed into an empire. So is it okay, or do we need any changes to this sentence?
In between small
Which ones, sir?
15th and 16th centuries.
Okay. So actually that is true. 15th and 16th century, these are generic usage words. So even if we read this sentence, it clearly says that we are not talking about one particular 15th century or 16th century. They are basically things which happened across, which spanned across these time periods, and they are named as 15th and 16th centuries. So as we know, in English, these are not considered as proper nouns. They are common nouns. So F would be in small, S would be in small. As we know, centuries are not capitalized, and England is the name, blossomed into an empire. So this is with this two letters changes in these two sentences, in these two words, everything is fine. So if I move to another example, which is in the 1800s, the world saw great technological advancement. So is this sentence fine, or do we need any changes to it? So basically this sentence is perfectly all right. So the 1800s, so what this is also, we are talking in as a generic usage. Here also it is acting as a common noun. It is not talking about a specific thing, and 1800s is also a different form of century. That is what they mean. Even the name has not been in the type of century, but the meaning is deriving the same. It is same meaning can be derived from 1800s. So this is also a common noun. This is not a specific noun, or this is not a proper noun. So as we know, it has to be in small letter, and it is in small letter. So this sentence is perfectly all right.
Surya?
Yeah.
In the second last one, if it was only like in the 15th century, it was not 15th and 16th, but it was only 15th. So it would be in capital or small case only.
Right. Even if there is only one century, suppose in 15th century England blossomed into an empire, or in 15th century England conquered India, or something like that, still the century would be in small letter only, because century here basically talking about it is a common noun. It is talking about a generic time period which spanned across so many years, but not specific to one particular event which happened. So it is not an event. So it is a time period which is large time period. So there is not specific thing which we are talking. So it becomes small letter only.
Okay.
right? So in continuation to it, there are some other examples. We'll see them. So as I mentioned to you, sometimes the proper nouns also, things which we have been capitalizing in the previous slide, sometimes they can also act as a common nouns, because sometimes they are used in general sense, not in specific sense. So how exactly would they be different? We'll see here in this examples. So here, if you see the first example, he uses Stone Age management techniques. So this is a sentence. If you see Stone Age management techniques, we are not particularly talking about a Stone Age era or Stone Age event. So basically, Stone Age is a big period of time, and there are so many different other management techniques. So in general, we are using in general sense that this person is usually using some Stone Age techniques or some early man techniques or something like that. So here it is acting as a general sense, not specific sense. So Stone Age here it will not be a proper noun. Here it is giving a general sense, generic usage sense. So S and A have been put in small letter. This is the thing. And if we see in the second example, a crusade against poverty. Usually what happened in Europe back in before so many decades was there was some crusade which happened. Usually Europeans have attacked one particular religious group, citing some reasons against rich and poor indifferences in the society, and that period have been identified as crusade. But here if you see a crusade, usually the time period is such that a crusade we are talking about in general sense, not particularly the crusade which happened this thing. There are different crusades, and if you see a crusade against poverty, here in general a crusade is talking, it is giving a generic sense, not the particular crusade which we are talking about. So because that gives a generic sense, not a specific crusade event which happened, so that is the reason why it has been put in small letters. So if you see in the third example, the two world wars, like which world war are we talking about? Is it World War I or is it World War II? It is not giving any specific usage, or it is not giving any specific name of that event. We are in generic usage, we are talking usually this things happen in world wars, or people die in world wars. So it is giving a generic sense. We are not talking about particular event. So that is the reason world wars have been put in small letters, even though we have mentioned them in capital letters in the previous example. In that case, it was a specific event. Here in this case, it is not. If you see this fourth example, the last ice age ended around 11,500 years ago. So which the sentence itself is giving a meaning, the last ice age, which means there are so many ice age periods. We are talking about in general last ice age which happened around 11,500 ago. Usually ice age has been started from one particular to this area, and are we talking about one particular event in that ice age? Are we talking about one significant thing happened in ice age? No, we're talking in generic ice age. Usually it started somewhere, we don't know the exact date, but it has ended some thousands of years ago. Usually we give here 11,500 years ago. So it is giving a general sense, it is giving a generic meaning, not particular meaning. So that is the reason why it has been put in small letters. So if you see these things, usually if you are talking about any significant or specific event in that particular age or particular time period, they will be capitalized. But if they are used in general sense, then they are not capitalized here. So these are the things with the specific events. Does anyone have any doubts in this topic? Okay, so with this we'll come to the final topic in the capitalization in this whole session. So this is the final topic in capitalizations topic. So trademarks. So generally the name trademarks itself is giving that it has some specific usage, or it belongs to some specific group of people, or specific set of people, or specific company, or specific person. Usually trademarks they usually have copyrights in this thing. And trademarks by name itself is they are proper nouns. So Pepsi, it becomes a name. Honda, it becomes a name. Maruti Suzuki becomes a name, IBM, Microsoft Word, or Perceptive Analytics, or anything which becomes a proper name which has a specific trademark which has been registered. So that becomes the brand name. It is the name of a brand. It is name of company. It is name of. So usually, if they invent something, that innovation gets named. So so basically they are all considered as proper nouns. They are not general nouns or general not common nouns. They give some specific meaning or then some specific belongingness to particular group. So they would become. So usually we have to capitalize those letters or the first letter of that word, the brand names or the company names, the trademarks. So these are the things with capitalizations.